the best path that a person should focus on more than anything else. And there were 5 opinions given by the 5 sages. And one of them is ayin tova, to have a good eye. So we went into the fact that there are a few ways to interpret what it means to have a good eye. The last thing we spoke about was a good eye could also mean to see the good in everything. Because everything in the world, everything has in it positive and has in it things that are negative. There's pros and cons. So besides the fact that people have in them positive and negative, situations have in them positive and negative, and the nature of a person is different. Some people, what registers in their head is the positive, and they see it in a positive way. And some people, what registers in their head is the negative, and they see the person or the things that are happening in a negative way. So a good eye means an eye that's conditioned to see the good in everything, the good in people and the good in things, and to see it in a positive way. The previous Rebbe tells a story that when he was a child, he wants to ask his father why Hashem created us with 2 eyes. You have 1 nose, you have 1 mouth, but 2 eyes. Why their eyes are 2? So he asked him, do you know the difference between shin and sin, the 2 letters? He said, yeah, they're both identical. But the difference is, in one of them, the dot is on the right side. And the other one, the dot is on the left side. So the word, when you use the term the dot, it's like saying in English, the point. In other words, the emphasis. So it's like this, we have 2 eyes. In certain things, we have to look at them with the right eye. And certain things with the left eye. Basically, it means that when you're dealing with something good and positive, you see it in a very strong way, and you really focus on it, and you emphasize it, and you pay attention to it, and you look at it with your right eye. That means the dot is on the right side. That's what you're focusing on. When you see things that are negative, then you look at them with the left eye. It means you don't pay so much attention to it. It might be there, but you don't focus on it. You don't make that into an issue, and you deal with it in a more way, sort of a loose way. You look at it with the left eye, meaning in a weak way. I would think it's almost like having a magnifying glass. When you have a magnifying glass, you look at something, and it's very small. When you look under the magnifying glass, actually it looks huge. A little tiny bug could look like a monster if you look through a magnifying glass. And so what are you magnifying? Some people like to magnify and exaggerate things that are positive, make them bigger than they are. And some people like to magnify and exaggerate things that are negative because they're emphasizing the positive, emphasizing the negative. So a good eye means either I'm born that way or I can train myself that way to look at things and try to notice the positive and the negative. There's a famous story, you might have heard it because I'm sure it circulates all over the world, but it's a famous story with a man who worked in a company for 40 years. 40 years, worked in the company, had a very important position, and one day he made some sort of mistake they lost money, and the board decided to fire him. So he said to them, I have one request. Before I actually leave the company, I'd like to speak to the board, say a few words. Okay, fine. So they had a meeting, all the members of the board got together, and he was there, and he walked over to this whiteboard over here. It was like this, all clean, and he did this. And he said, what do you see? So we see a black dot. He says, really? Look how much white there is all around here. And what you see is the black dot. The white is hundreds of times more than the little black dot. The point he was trying to bring out was I worked for 40 years, and during these 40 years, I was dedicated and devoted to the business, and I did so much good. And the one time I did one thing, boom, that disqualifies everything else. But unfortunately, that's the way we also sometimes look at people. Some people, unfortunately, look like that at themselves, that they just focus on something negative, and that catches their eye, and that registers, and they can't get their mind off it. And everything else that's so good around it is like, doesn't register. And some people are the opposite. So he is saying that a great quality to have, which will ultimately lead to all the other good things, is to have a good eye. Okay, let's go to the other opinions. So back to the Mishnah. And in the Mishnah, the first opinion was a good eye. The second opinion was a good friend. And the third opinion was a good neighbor. So I'm not going to go into this at length and in detail because we already had this in the first chapter where we spoke about the importance. But basically, at least to say briefly is that the influence and the impact that friends have on a person is very strong. And very often there are people that would never do something which is, let's say, negative, but peer pressure, everybody says, come on, go ahead, don't worry, it's okay, no. And the people around you end up encouraging you to do something which you would never do yourself. And sometimes it also works in the positive, that when you're in a certain environment, an environment of people that are positive and do positive things, it somehow naturally lifts you, that you also get into that mood and frame of mind to do something positive. So that's why we find a lot of emphasis in Torah on having close friends, good friends, and having good neighbors. Because even though it's not me, it's someone else, but that has an influence on me. And we find this in the Chumash with Avraham Avinu, that his greatness was that the whole world was into idol worship, and he was one single person, of course, with Sarah, that believed in Hashem, and he stood up to the whole world. And that's what's so incredible, that he wasn't influenced by the fact that the whole entire world, it was different. And we find the same with Noah, the one who had the flood, that Hashem saved him. And that it says that, one opinion says that in some ways he's even a greater tzaddik than Abraham, because he lived in such a corrupt time that the people obviously was so corrupt that the people had to be destroyed through a flood, and yet he was a tzaddik. So in a certain way, this means that his righteousness was somehow much greater than others who were righteous amongst righteous. So we see that the influence of, now again, it's never an excuse. Like if somebody does something wrong, they can't say, I can't help it. Everybody else was doing that, so I'll also do it. That's not an excuse, but it still means that it's easier to do the right thing when you're in a good environment. And we should always choose to be in a good environment because that's going to have an impact on us. Even though I should be able to overcome that challenge, but we don't look for challenges. That's the rule. When a person overcomes a challenge, it's extremely rewarding. And there is and according to the Torah, this person gets tremendous reward for that. The feeling is a rewarding feeling for me, but we don't look for challenges. In fact, we daven every day. If you pay attention to what comes out of your mouth in the morning, one of the prayers in the morning is, Hashem, don't bring me to a test. So therefore, we don't put ourselves in a testing, challenging situation. What is the difference? How come one of them says a good friend and one says a good neighbor? Anyone remember what we spoke about in the beginning, in the first chapter, what the difference is? Why does one emphasize a friend? And the other one says, no, more a good neighbor than a good friend.
Proximity, like the environment in which you're living in can affect you, it does affect you. So if you have a good neighbor and they're always affecting you, or on the opposite, they're always affecting you negatively, that might have an impact greater than they're arguing these two, like which one's better, than let's say a really good friend that's like on the other side of the country or something.
Okay. So to put it into words, the question is what's more effective, more powerful, quantity or quality? In other words, a good friend is someone that in terms of quality, they're closer to me. But a neighbor, I don't have to be close to my neighbor. They just live next door, especially if you're in New York City, forget it. You don't even know who they are. You don't even know what's going on in their life. But a neighbor means that geographically speaking, we live in the same area, but there's no near closeness. But being in a neighborhood, like when you live in Sodom, the people who live in Sodom, like it says about Lot, he lived there, he became like one of them, which means that the environment, technically, because you're physically close, it has an effect. So one of them says what's more impactful is being around someone negative constantly, which is a neighbor. And the other one says what's more impactful is when you have a deeper relationship with someone, and that's a negative person, that'll affect me worse. So everyone agrees that both are negative and both are things that we should avoid. The only question is, which is more powerful than the other? There's stories in Chumash, actually. One of the stories is a whole parsha about someone called Korach. Korach did something which had a tremendous effect on the Jews in the desert, and that was that he led a revolution against Moshe Rabbeinu. And the reason why he did that was because he wanted a position of leadership. He was from the same family. He was in the tribe of Levi. He was from Moshe Rabbeinu's family, and he felt that Moshe Rabbeinu is not being fair. He's only giving the position, this is to his brother, and this is to his nephew, and this is his brother-in-law, and he wanted a position of leadership. But the Gemara says, why were the people from the tribe of Reuven involved? They wouldn't gain anything out of it anyway. Only he would gain. And the Gemara answers because they lived next to each other. When they were camping in the desert, they camped next to each other, so they were influenced by Korach. So we see how just being around someone that's negative could be a negative influence, and being around someone that's positive could be a positive influence. If you remember the story that we learned in the Chumash with Sodom, Hashem wanted to destroy the city. What did Abraham say? If there are tzaddikim living there, then Hashem won't destroy it. In other words, the mere fact that tzaddikim live there would be enough of a reason that in spite of their wickedness, they shouldn't be destroyed. So we see that just having neighbors that are positive is a positive effect, and having neighbors that are negative is a negative effect. And certainly a friend when you're close to, of course, has an impact because you're very close to that person. Then came Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon says, Arayos HaNoilad. That's what we're going to cover now here on the page 6, I think. Arayos HaNoilad means someone who sees the outcome. Yeah, page 6. There's another very famous quote in Gemara along the same lines. It says, Ezehu Chacham, who is considered wise, Harayas HaNoilad, he who sees the outcome. Which means that this is a tremendous tool to make sure that I make the right choices in life and not the wrong choices in life. And what is that? That whenever I'm ready to do something, to get involved in something, and I'm debating whether it's the right thing, the wrong thing, the good thing, the bad thing, a person should look not at what it does for me now, but we said the other day, what is going to be on the long run? What will be in a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now? That's how we have to judge it. Because in fact, the way Hashem created the world is very interesting. Most things that are destructive actually look very pleasant and sweet and exciting for the moment. Later, they become destructive. Like, unfortunately, people who take drugs or drink or other addictions, why do they do it? Because when they do it, they're on a high and they're excited. But in the long run, it destroys, God forbid, their lives. And a lot of the things that are actually very good things, initially, it doesn't seem to be so easy. You have to work hard. You have to invest a lot. You have to spend a lot of time, sometimes spend a lot of money. But eventually, on the long run, you'll be gaining. I mean, even when you talk about something like food, there's healthy food and there's what they call junk food. Which tastes better?
Junk.
Not even a question. Healthy food lost that one. Junk food tastes much better. And that's why people have such a hard time disciplining themselves. But which food will bring better results in the long run, in the future, is of course the healthy food. You feel light, you feel healthy, you have energy, and your brain is working better. And the junk food makes a person feel heavy. It has certain things that it actually does damage to a person's health in the long run. So it's the same thing as with a healthy or junk lifestyle. The junk lifestyle is fun and enjoyment and entertainment and jumping up and down and spending money and doing this and that. But then comes a certain point where it's all empty and you're left with nothingness. And a life of content, of life with meaning, which is to what Hashem created us in this world to do, it might be more challenging to do it. It will be more challenging to do it. But on the long run, that's what's going to bring the better results and the good results. So on this page, number 6, the second thing on the page says, V'sartem v'abadatem. Anyone recognize where those words come from? Say it every day. Some say it 3 times a day. What? Amida. Close. It's a neighbor of Shema Esrei, Shema. We say it in the Shema. V'sartem, you will turn away, v'abadatem, and you will worship other gods. So the Baal Shem Tov says there's a very interesting insight here. V'sartem means you'll turn away. We mean, how does a person come to worship other gods? It doesn't happen. You wake up one morning and a person decides, I'm jumping to the other side of the fence. But you turn away. You do a little thing, which is a little bit out of line. And then another little thing, which is out of line. And another little thing, which is out of line. And eventually you find yourself worshiping idols. So this is a famous quote in Gemara. And that's the number 3 on the page, where it says, this is referring to the Yetzer Hara. Today, he tells you to do this. Tomorrow, it tells you to do that. And then eventually, it tells you to go worship idols, which means my Yetzer Hara comes along and says to do a little something which is deviating from the right path. By the way, even Begashmis, if a person's on a road and then they don't recognize that something's not right, so they stop the car, they take a look and they find out they're 50 miles away from where they're supposed to be. How did they get there? The car wasn't standing and suddenly appeared 50 miles away. He made a small turn. And that turn was just 1 foot, 1 yard, 2 yards, 3 yards, 5 yards, a mile, 2 miles. Eventually, you're 50 miles away. Same thing is also spiritually, that a person makes a small little move, and eventually that small move could lead to being further away. So the art of life is that when you make the small moves to stop and think, where am I going right now? When I go there, I'm very far away. Right now, where am I going? Where's this going to lead to? And if I realize that, I'll stop myself right in the beginning, and I don't end up going in a place where I don't want to go. This is behind a lot of the halachas in Torah, like muktzah, the laws of yichud. What does it mean? It means this in itself is not prohibited. Laws of yichud means a man and a woman to be alone in a room. That in itself, they're not committing anything which is a sin. They're not doing an avera. But the Torah says that if a person would be allowed to be in such circumstances, then it's very easy from there to go to another thing, and eventually they would be committing a sin. So therefore, the Torah says, don't do step 1, so you won't end up doing the final step, which is prohibited. Or laws of muktzah. I'm not allowed to hold a pen in my hand. What's wrong with holding a pen? Because you're not allowed to write on Shabbos. If you hold a pen, you'll end up writing. Or many other halachas that are along those lines. I don't do this because it could lead to that. So, of course, there are people that always say, I know myself, I have to worry. I'll never go there. But no person could trust themselves, And there were people who said that, and eventually they made the same mistake. I think I told the story also in chapter 1. Famous story in Gemara with someone called Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah.
About candle?
What about the candle on Shabbos? That he lit a candle, that the Chacham said you're not allowed to study Torah on Shabbos near a candle, because when you're studying Torah, you're very deeply into your studies, and you might not realize that your hand might straighten out the flame, and that's like making a flame on Shabbos. So basically, he said it's not going to happen to me, and he did it. And eventually, it happened one Friday night that he was studying, and by mistake, he adjusted the flame. But he went ahead and he publicized the story that people should learn, even though it's embarrassing. People should learn that when the Chacham says something along these lines, no one should say, I'm different, because we're human, and the Torah knows human weaknesses. So that's the meaning of the word, v'sartem v'abadatem. You should, once you move away a little bit, if you don't stop yourself on time, you might end up all the way at the other end doing avodah zarah. There was once a student here in school that she said that when her grandmother came from Europe to America, she was Shomer Shabbos. So how did it happen? The whole family grew up not religious. So it was very hard to make a living. And people wouldn't hire somebody if they don't want to work on Shabbos. So in the beginning, she didn't do it, and she couldn't get a job. And then eventually, she had no choice, and she decided she has to feed her children. She's going to get a job. She got a job on Shabbos, but she lived in Brooklyn. The job was in Manhattan. And she said, but I'm not going to drive. I'm not going to take a car. I'll walk. And she walked. She worked on Shabbos because she felt she had no choice. But who says I can't walk? And she walked every Shabbos for 2 hours back and forth. After a few weeks, she said, who am I kidding? I'm working on Shabbos anyway. I might as well ride on Shabbos. And then the next thought was, if I'm working on Shabbos or riding on Shabbos, I'm not going to make a bracha when I eat. I'm such a hypocrite. And then one thing led to another, until she stopped everything. And the children grew up, didn't even know that she was once a Shabbos observant person. That's the way the Yetzer Hara works. So that's called Reyes HaNoiled. When I do something, look, stop, and think, what will be the outcome? In business, it's the same principle as well. Good businessman, a bad businessman. Some people grab opportunities. It looks amazing, but they don't realize right now it's amazing, but in a few months from now, you're going to lose everything. And some things right now, you're not doing much, but in a few months from now, this is going to be slow and steady, and you'll really make a lot of money. So the main thing is to look ahead. There's another phrase, I didn't put it here, but it's Ezehu Chacham, who's considered wise, Mishaina Beresha, the one who has his eyes, literally means his eyes in his head. So the question is, everybody has eyes in their head. But it means his eyes are at the head, meaning to say the same thing, ahead of me, what is going to be in the future for what I'm doing now? Okay. Now the fifth opinion is that the main thing is the heart. Which means if a person is sensitive, has compassion, and is caring, and he has a sensitive heart, that's regarding other people. Also regarding Hashem, he's sensitive in terms of his feelings for Hashem. Then eventually that will lead to all the other positive character traits and do the positive things. And we see this also in the Shema. So turn to page 7. These lines, this is from the Shema. Don't look after your heart and your eyes, which means, remember we learned this the other day, that the eyes and the heart are like two agents. The eyes see things, and the heart starts pounding, but it's really the heart. If I let my heart loose, just give in to whatever I want, I'll do negative things. If I'm disciplining my heart, I'll do positive things. And the main thing is to develop the proper feelings in the heart, to have a feeling and enjoyment and pleasure from helping another person, to be sensitive to another person's pain. If you feel like that, then eventually you'll never feel selfish. you'll always want to be giving. And all those mitzvahs that have to do with interpersonal relationship, be in the right place. You wouldn't even think of embarrassing someone. You wouldn't think of hitting someone. You wouldn't think of taking someone else's money if your heart was in the right place. And at the end, Rabbi Yochanan said, that is the main thing of all the 5 things, the heart. So these are the 5 things that they mentioned in the positive. And naturally, we have them all in the negative, the exact opposite in the negative. Any questions, any remarks, anything to say? Yes.
I know from girls community program that you told them 2 ways how to reach your goal. Like it's a long way and short way. Could you tell me more?
That's from Tanya, you mean?
Yeah.
I can't do that in a short way. It's 5 to 3. It'll be a long way. What I said was also there's a long, short way, and there's a short, long way. In other words, there's 4 things. There's a long way, there's a short way, then there's a long, short way, and there's a short, long way. Now you understand? Okay.
Now it's more clear.
So talking about compassion, look at page 8. The Hebrew word for, that's one of the very important attributes. In fact, it says this is one of the attributes that define a descendant of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, compassion. And you had this in the beginning of Tanya, where it says that even the animal soul of a Jew naturally has good character traits. And what are they? These 3, to be compassionate, to have shame, and to be benevolent. And very often, the Gemara refers to a member of a Jewish nation as Rachmanim, Bnei Rachmanim, compassionate, children of compassion, which means compassion is part of our genes. By the way, it doesn't mean that every single Jew has compassion. Unfortunately, we know plenty of Jews that were sadists in the worst order, and unfortunately, they had no problem killing people and doing horrible things. But it means that it's in their genes to be compassionate. And of course, every person could go against their nature and do things that are not really who they are, unfortunately. But the nature of a Yid is that he's compassionate. And if a person would work on themselves, they are able to allow that nature to surface and they'll feel the compassion in a regular way. Now, of course, compassion in itself is a good character trait. It means to feel another person's pain and you feel it to the point that you want to help them. But there's another thing, and that is that Hashem relates to us the way we relate to others. So on the sheet, on page number 8, you have number 3, where it's a quote from Gemara, Kol hamarachem ala briyos, those who have compassion on others, Hashem has compassion for them. So that means if someone doesn't have compassion to another person, chas v'shalom, they might be sort of inviting that kind of behavior, that kind of relationship between Hashem and them, that Hashem says, you didn't have compassion on them, so then I won't have compassion on you. And if you remember, we told the story of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. You remember that story of Rabbi Yehuda and Gemara? Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, who was the leader of Jewry, was once had a period in his life where he was sick for 13 years, with terrible pain. And the reason was because he didn't have compassion on an animal, not a human being, on an animal. And obviously, it wasn't outright being mean to the animal. It means on a level that was expected of him. And the story in Gemara is that there was an animal being a calf. They were leading it to be brought to be slaughtered. And the calf tore itself away from the owner and ran towards Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, who was there at the time, and cuddled up as if to say, save me. And instead of saving the animal, he said to the animal, don't worry, you should go. This is why Hashem created you. You're going is fulfilling the mission for which you were created. And then it said that it was a heavenly voice or heavenly verdict that being that you didn't have compassion on this animal, then Hashem won't have compassion on you. And he got sick. And he suffered for 13 years. And after 13 years, how did his illness disappear? Well, also with compassion. That there was, some say it was kitten, some say it was weasel, some say it was another animal that gave birth to baby animals in the house. And the maid sees these baby, either kittens or whatever, wanted to carry them out. And he said to her, why are you taking it outside? Have compassion on them and leave them here indoors, will be more safe. And at that moment in heaven, they said, being that you had compassion on these animals, Hashem will have compassion on you, and his illness stopped miraculously. So that's what it means. And this is one of Hashem's character traits. Hashem is compassionate. One of the words we use in the Torah, in davening, is Hashem is compassionate. And we're supposed to follow his ways. So therefore, just like he's compassionate, we should be compassionate. That's number 4. Number 5 is the Hebrew word for the opposite of compassion. Compassion means that it hurts me to see someone hurting. And a sadist is someone that actually enjoys seeing other people in pain. Most normal human beings can't even imagine how that's possible. But unfortunately, we know there are such people. And number 6 is the Gimel Midas Rachman, the 13 attributes of mercy, which means there's the general compassion of Hashem, and then there's the 13 attributes of mercy. That's compassion on the highest level, where it says that if those attributes of mercy are aroused, there's nothing that Hashem wouldn't forgive. And when was it? Where do we find this in the Chumash? When the Jews worshipped the golden calf, and it looked like Hashem wanted to punish them, and then Moshe pronounced these 13 attributes of mercy, and that way they were protected and saved. Okay, we will stop here.